The Galactic Council had watched Earth for a very long time. For nearly 500 years, their ships had floated in the darkness beyond the small blue planet. They recorded everything. They watched humans build cities and tear them down. They watched humans fight each other over land, water, and ideas. They watched humans split the atom and reach for the stars. The council was made up of 47 different species from across the galaxy. Some were ancient beings of pure energy. Others were insectoid creatures with hard shells and cold eyes. Some breathed oxygen like humans. Others lived in pools of acid or clouds of ammonia. But they all agreed on one thing about humans: they were not special. High Counselor Thrax, a tall being with gray skin and 4 yellow eyes, had written the official report on humanity himself. He called them a mid-tier developing species. This meant they were smart enough to be interesting, but too weak to matter. Humans had only left their own solar system 50 years ago. They had small colonies on Mars and a few mining stations in the asteroid belt. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were basic. They were children playing in a very dangerous playground. The Council had seen species like this before. They rose, they struggled, and then something bigger came along and crushed them. It was the way of the galaxy. The strong survived. The weak became slaves or footnotes in history books. So when the Veluxy Empire turned its attention toward Earth, the Council simply watched. The Veluxy were conquerors. They had been conquering for 10,000 years. Their empire stretched across 300 star systems, and every system was built on the bones of species they had defeated. They were insectoid creatures, each one standing 8 feet tall with 4 arms and mandibles that could bite through steel. Their ships were fast and deadly. Their soldiers were fearless. They had never lost a war. The Veluxy High Commander, a massive creature named Kreth, sent a simple message to the human colonies: surrender or die. It was the same message they had sent to 100 species before. Most species surrendered. The ones who fought were destroyed quickly and completely. The humans did not respond to the message. Commander Jake Harrison read the Veluxy transmission from the bridge of his ship, the USS Vigilant. He was a man in his early 50s, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much death. He had fought in the resource wars back on Earth, the terrible conflicts that had nearly destroyed humanity before they united. He had lost friends, family, and pieces of himself in those wars. But he had survived. He always survived. Lieutenant Katie Mercer stood beside him at the tactical station. She was younger, maybe 30, with red hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She had grown up on Mars, the daughter of miners who had worked themselves to death so she could go to the military academy. She was brilliant with weapon systems and completely calm under pressure. Chief Engineer Ben Lawson worked at his station nearby. He was a big man with dark skin and hands that could fix anything. He had built half the systems on this ship himself, improving the original designs until the Vigilant was faster and stronger than anything else in the human fleet. Together, they stared at the sensor readings showing the Veluxy fleet approaching. 412 ships, Katie said. Her voice was steady, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. They'll reach the outer colonies in 6 days. Jake nodded slowly. The human fleet had 23 combat-ready vessels. They were outnumbered nearly 20 to 1. By any reasonable calculation, they had already lost. What are their ship types? He asked. 200 standard cruisers, 100 heavy destroyers, 50 carrier ships with fighter support, 40 troop transports, and 12 command vessels. Katie paused. Sir, even if we gathered every ship we have, we couldn't stop them. Ben looked up from his station. Commander, maybe we should try to negotiate. Buy some time for civilian evacuation. Jake was silent for a long moment. He thought about the Veluxy message. Surrender or die. He thought about what the Veluxy did to species that surrendered. The reports from other conquered worlds spoke of slavery, forced breeding programs, and entire populations worked to death in mines and factories. Death would be mercy compared to that fate. No negotiations, Jake said finally. Sir? Katie turned to look at him. Call Admiral Graves on Earth. Tell her we need to activate Protocol Omega. Katie's face went pale. Protocol Omega was something that existed only in classified files. It was the plan humanity had created in case they ever faced total extinction. It was the plan that said if humanity was going to die, they would make sure their enemies died with them. Commander. Protocol Omega means... Katie couldn't finish the sentence. I know what it means, Jake said. Make the call. Far away, in the council chambers of the Galactic Council, the assembled ambassadors watched the events unfold with mild interest. Ambassador Kelvix, a being that looked like a pile of green jelly, made a wet sound that was his species' version of a laugh. The humans are discussing strategy, he said. How amusing. As if it will matter. High Counselor Thrax nodded his large head. The Veluxy will reach their colonies in less than a week. We should prepare the documentation for another extinct species. Perhaps some humans will survive as slaves, said another ambassador, a crystalline creature that chimed when it spoke. The Veluxy sometimes keep the useful ones alive. Unlikely, Thrax replied. Humans are too aggressive, too independent. The Veluxy will have to break their spirit completely, and humans do not break easily. They will probably be exterminated. None of the council members suggested helping. That was not how the galaxy worked. The strong conquered. The weak fell. Interfering with the natural order was forbidden by council law. So they watched and waited for humanity to die. Back on the Vigilant. Jake Harrison received confirmation that Protocol Omega was approved. Every human military commander in the solar system was receiving the same orders. Every nuclear weapon, every chemical agent, every doomsday device that humanity had ever created was being brought out of storage and prepared for deployment. Jake looked at his crew. These were good people. Brave people. They deserved to know what was coming. We're going to war, he told them. Not a war to defend ourselves. Not a war to negotiate peace. We're going to war to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity. He turned to face the stars on the main view screen. They think we're weak. They think we'll surrender or die quietly. They're wrong. His voice was hard as iron. We're going to teach them a lesson they'll never forget. And if we have to burn the entire galaxy to do it, then that's exactly what we'll do. Katie and Ben exchanged looks. They had always known their commander was dangerous. But until this moment, they had never understood just how dangerous the countdown to the battle had begun. And across the galaxy, no one had any idea what was coming. The Veluxy fleet moved through space like a swarm of angry insects. 412 ships, each one bristling with weapons, each one carrying soldiers eager for conquest. High Commander Kreth stood on the bridge of his flagship and felt nothing but confidence. He had destroyed civilizations before. Humans would be no different. His second-in-command, a smaller Veluxy named Vrix, approached with a datapad. High Commander, we have intercepted human communications. They are mobilizing their entire fleet. Kreth made a clicking sound that was the Veluxy version of laughter. Their entire fleet? 20 ships against our 400? Let them come. It will make the conquest faster. There's something else, Rick said. Our spies report that they have activated something called Protocol Omega. We do not know what this means. It means they are desperate, Kreth replied. Desperate prey always makes noise before it dies. Continue the advance. We will reach their outer colonies in 5 days. While the Veluxy fleet traveled toward Earth, The humans were preparing something the galaxy had never seen before. Admiral Nicole Graves stood in the command center on Earth's moon. She was 60 years old with silver hair and a face lined with decades of service. She had hoped to retire soon, to spend her remaining years in peace. Instead, she was planning the most violent military operation in human history. Around her, hundreds of officers worked at their stations. Screens showed ship positions, weapon inventories, and troop deployments. Everything was being coordinated with perfect precision. "Status report," she called out. A young officer named Danny Clark looked up from his console. "Admiral, all nuclear assets have been loaded onto drone carriers. Chemical weapons are being distributed to frontline ships. The suicide squadrons have finished their training." Suicide squadrons? A visiting politician, a nervous man who had come to observe, stepped forward. "Admiral, you cannot be serious. We cannot ask our soldiers to throw their lives away." Admiral Graves turned to look at him. Her eyes were cold. "I did not ask anyone to die. I asked for volunteers. Every pilot in those squadrons chose to be there. They know what is at stake. They know that if we lose, humanity ends. They are willing to pay any price to stop that from happening." The politician opened his mouth to argue, but something in the Admiral's expression made him stop. He had never seen such absolute determination in a human face before. On the Galactic Council station, the assembled ambassadors were enjoying the show. They had created a special viewing area where members could watch the coming battle in comfort. Food and drinks were served. Bets were placed on how quickly the humans would fall. High Counselor Thrax sat in his special chair, his 4 eyes fixed on the main screen. He had seen many species die over his long life. He wondered if humans would beg for mercy at the end, or if they would simply accept their fate. Ambassador Kelvix floated beside him, his gelatinous body rippling with amusement. "I have calculated the odds. The humans have a 0.3 PERCENT chance of survival. And that is being generous. Perhaps they will surprise us," said a small furry creature named Tobin, the ambassador from a peaceful trading species. He had always been fond of humans. They reminded him of his own people before they had learned to accept their place in the galaxy. "Surprises how?" Kelvix laughed. "They have no allies, no advanced technology, no experience fighting a real war. The Veluxi have conquered species 10 times more powerful than humans. This will be over in hours." Tobin said nothing, but something in his ancient eyes suggested he was not so certain. The first battle happened at the edge of human space, near a mining station orbiting a gas giant called Neptune. The station had been evacuated, but Commander Jake Harrison and a small group of ships waited nearby. The Veluxi Advance Force, 50 ships sent ahead to scout, dropped out of faster-than-light travel and immediately detected the human vessels. The Veluxi commander, a young officer eager to prove himself, ordered an immediate attack. Jake Harrison watched the enemy ships approach on his screen. 50 against 5. Normal commanders would retreat. But Jake was not a normal commander. "Katie," he said calmly, "are the drones ready?" Lieutenant Mercer checked her console. "Ready, sir." 12 drones, each carrying a 50-megaton nuclear warhead. "Send them." The drones launched from the human ships and accelerated toward the Veluxi formation. They were small, hard to detect, and moving at incredible speed. By the time the Veluxi realized what was happening, it was too late. 12 nuclear explosions lit up the darkness of space. The Veluxi ships had shields, but they were designed to stop energy weapons and missiles. They were not designed to handle the raw, primitive fury of nuclear fire. 23 Veluxi ships were destroyed instantly. Another 15 were badly damaged. Only 12 escaped unharmed. On the council station, the viewing room went silent. High Counselor Thrax leaned forward, his 4 eyes wide. What? What did we just see? Nuclear weapons, Ambassador Togan said quietly. Atomic explosions. An old technology. Most species abandon it once they develop more elegant weapons. But it worked, Kelvik said, his gelatinous body shivering with shock. It actually worked. The humans did not abandon their primitive weapons, Tobin explained. They kept them. They improved them. And now they are using them. On the Veluxy flagship, High Commander Kreth received the report from his surviving scouts. He stared at the data in disbelief. Nearly 40 ships destroyed in a single engagement against 5 human vessels. It was impossible. It was humiliating. How? He demanded. How did they do this? They used explosive devices, Rix explained. Atomic weapons. Very old technology. Our shields are not designed to stop physical explosions of that magnitude. Then modify the shields, Kreth ordered. Adapt. Overcome. We are Veluxy. We do not lose to primitive species. But deep in his mind, a small voice whispered something that Kreth had never felt before in his long career of conquest. Fear. The humans had drawn first blood. And they were just getting started. Back on the moonbase, Admiral Graves received news of the victory. She allowed herself a small smile, but she knew this was only the beginning. The main Veluxy fleet was still coming. They would adapt to the nuclear weapons. They would find countermeasures. The humans needed to stay one step ahead. Begin Phase 2, she ordered. Deploy the chemical warfare units. Prepare the asteroid redirection systems. And tell Commander Harrison to fall back to the second defense line. Danny Clark hesitated. Admiral, Phase 2 includes the biological agents, the ones we swore never to use. I know what it includes, Graves replied. The Veluxy came here to enslave or exterminate our species. Every rule, every law, every moral code we ever created was meant to protect humanity. If we have to break those rules to survive, then we break them. Do you understand? Danny swallowed hard and nodded. Yes, Admiral. Across the galaxy, species were beginning to pay closer attention to the human conflict. What had seemed like a simple conquest was becoming something else entirely. Something darker. Something that made even the oldest and most powerful civilizations nervous. The humans were not fighting like a civilized species. They were fighting like animals. Like monsters. Like something that had been pushed into a corner and had decided to burn the world rather than surrender. And the worst part was, they seemed to be enjoying it. The main Veluxy fleet arrived at human space 3 days after the first battle. High Commander Kreth had modified his ship's shields based on the reports from the survivors. He was confident that the nuclear trick would not work again. He was ready for a real fight. What he was not ready for was what the humans had planned. The second engagement happened near Mars. The red planet hung in space like a drop of blood. And around it, 2 fleets faced each other. The Veluxy had 350 ships remaining. The humans had gathered everything they had, a total of 19 combat vessels plus dozens of support ships. On the bridge of the USS Resolute, Admiral Nicole Graves watched the enemy formation. Her face showed nothing, but inside she felt the weight of humanity's survival pressing down on her. They've adapted their shields, said her tactical officer, a young woman named Susan Palmer. Nuclear weapons will be less effective now. Then we move to Phase 2, Graves replied. Signal the chemical warfare ships. Tell them to begin deployment. Susan hesitated for just a moment before relaying the order. She knew what Phase 2 meant. Everyone did. And it terrified them almost as much as it would terrify the enemy. The chemical warfare ships were small, fast vessels loaded with sealed containers. Inside those containers were compounds that humanity had sworn never to use. Nerve agents that could kill in seconds. biological weapons that caused bodies to rot from the inside, toxins that attacked the brain and drove victims mad with pain before death finally took them. These weapons were illegal under human law. Using them was a crime punishable by death. But Admiral Graves had been given special authority by Earth's government. In a war of extinction, there were no rules. The small ships darted through the Veluxy formation, releasing their payloads. The chemicals were designed to penetrate the air systems of enemy vessels. Within minutes, Veluxy soldiers began dying in horrible ways. They screamed and clawed at their own faces as their nervous systems shut down. They bled from every opening in their bodies. They turned on each other in blind rage as the madness toxins took hold. On the council viewing station, the ambassadors watched in stunned silence. "This cannot be happening," Kelvix whispered, his gelatinous body turning a sickly gray color. "These weapons, they are barbaric. No civilized species uses such things." High Counselor Thrax could not speak. He had seen many wars in his long life, but nothing like this. The humans were not just fighting. They were inflicting maximum suffering on their enemies. They wanted the Veluxy to feel pain before death. "Should we intervene?" asked a crystalline ambassador whose light had dimmed with horror. "It is against council law to interfere," Thrax replied, his voice shaking. We must simply observe." But even as he said it, he wondered if they were making a terrible mistake. Back in the battle, Commander Jake Harrison led a squadron of fighters through the chaos. His ship was small and fast, designed for close combat. Around him, other pilots flew with the same desperate courage. One of them was Captain Chris Donovan, a pilot who had grown up in the slums of New Chicago. He had lost his mother and sister when a Veluxy scout ship had destroyed their civilian transport during the first days of the invasion. He had volunteered for the suicide squadrons without hesitation. "Commander," Chris called over the radio, "I'm out of missiles. My ship is damaged. Requesting permission for final protocol." Jake knew what that meant. Final protocol was the order that allowed a pilot to ram their ship directly into an enemy vessel. It was a death sentence, but it was also incredibly effective against large targets. "Permission granted," Jake said. His voice was steady, even though his heart was breaking. Chris was a good man, a brave man. He deserved better than this. "Give them hell, Captain." "Yes, sir." "Tell my dad I love him." Chris Donovan aimed his damaged fighter at the nearest Veluxy carrier. He pushed the engines to maximum and accelerated toward his target. The Veluxy tried to shoot him down, but he was moving too fast. Weaving through their defensive fire with skill born of desperation at the last moment, Chris activated the self-destruct on his ship's reactor. The explosion tore through the Veluxy carrier's hull, setting off a chain reaction that destroyed the massive vessel from the inside. Across the battlefield, other human pilots were doing the same thing. They flew their ships into enemy vessels without hesitation. They sacrificed themselves to take out targets that would otherwise be impossible to destroy. They died with screams of defiance on their lips. The Veluxy had never seen anything like it. Their tactical computers could not process enemies who did not care about their own survival. Their commanders could not understand soldiers who chose death so willingly. High Commander Kreth watched his fleet being torn apart by these insane tactics. His ships were dying. His soldiers were being poisoned and burned and rammed by enemies who fought like demons from ancient nightmares. "Fall back," he ordered, his voice hollow with shock. "All ships fall back. We need to regroup." It was the first time in 10,000 years that a Veluxy fleet had retreated from battle. On Earth's moonbase, Admiral Graves received the news of the Veluxy retreat. Around her, officers cheered and embraced each other. They had won. Against impossible odds, they had won. But Graves did not celebrate. She knew this was only a temporary victory. The Veluxi still had more ships. They still had their home world and their empire to draw reinforcements from. They would come back stronger. How many did we lose? She asked quietly. Danny Clark checked his console, his face pale. 7 combat ships destroyed. 43 fighters lost. Over 2,000 personnel killed in action. And the suicide squadrons. All 12 pilots are confirmed dead. 2,000 lives. 12 brave souls who had chosen to die so that humanity could survive. Graves felt the weight of each death like a stone in her chest. It's not enough, she said. Driving them back is not enough. As long as the Veluxi exist, they will keep coming. We need to end this permanently. What do you mean, Admiral? Danny asked. Graves turned to face her staff. Her eyes were hard as diamonds, and her voice was cold as the vacuum of space. We're going to their home world. We're going to show them what happens when you threaten humanity. And we're going to make sure they can never threaten anyone again. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what she was saying. This was no longer a war of defense. This was a war of annihilation. Far away on the council station, High Counselor Thrax was receiving reports from his intelligence officers. The news made his blood run cold. The humans are not accepting the Veluxi retreat as victory, the officer reported. They are gathering their remaining forces and preparing to pursue. Our analysts believe they intend to attack the Veluxi homeworld directly. That is insanity, Kelvik said. The Veluxi homeworld is protected by their entire reserve fleet. The humans would be committing suicide. I am not certain the humans care about that, Thrax replied slowly. I am beginning to think that humans do not fight wars the way other species do. They do not fight to win. They fight to destroy. Ambassador Tobin, the small furry creature, nodded his ancient head. I tried to tell you. Humans are not like us. They come from a death world, a planet that kills most species that try to evolve there. They survived by being more violent than their environment, more ruthless, more willing to sacrifice everything for victory. What have we done? Thrax whispered. We sat back and watched, thinking they would lose. Instead, we may have witnessed the birth of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Outside, the stars continued to burn. And somewhere in the darkness, a human fleet was preparing to bring fire and death to an enemy homeworld. The galaxy would never be the same. The human fleet traveled through the darkness of space for 11 days. They moved in complete radio silence, their ships running on minimal power to avoid detection. Every person on every ship knew where they were going and what they were about to do. Commander Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the USS Vigilant, now serving as part of the main attack force. He had not slept more than a few hours since the battle near Mars. His eyes were red and his hands sometimes shook, but his mind remained sharp. He would rest when this was over. Not before. Admiral Nicole Graves commanded the fleet from the Resolute. She had studied everything humanity knew about the Veluxi home world. It was a large planet with a thick atmosphere, rich in nitrogen and methane. 8 billion Veluxi lived there, along with countless slaves from conquered species. It was the heart of an empire that had terrorized the galaxy for 10,000 years, and humanity was going to burn it to ashes. Dr. Megan Liu was the fleet's chief science officer. She was a small woman with black hair and glasses, and she looked more like a librarian than a weapon designer. But behind those gentle eyes was a mind that had created some of the most devastating weapons humanity had ever produced. She stood before Admiral Graves in the command center, holding a datapad with her latest calculations. I have finished the analysis, she said. The Veluxi atmosphere is 73% nitrogen, 18% methane, and 9% other gases. If we introduce a specific catalyst compound at high altitude, we can trigger a cascading chemical reaction. What kind of reaction? Graves asked. The atmosphere will ignite. First the methane will burn, raising the temperature. Then the nitrogen will begin to react with the oxygen we release from our payloads. The entire planet will be engulfed in fire. Megan paused, her voice becoming quieter. The surface temperature will exceed 4,000 degrees. Nothing will survive. And the chemical changes will make the atmosphere toxic for at least 10,000 years. Graves was silent for a long moment. 8 billion lives. Billions of slaves who were innocent victims. An entire civilization erased in a single day. Is there any other way? She asked. No, Admiral. The Veluxi will not surrender. Even if they did, they would rebuild. They would come for us again. This is the only way to ensure humanity's permanent safety. Graves nodded slowly. Prepare the payload. We deploy when we reach the target. The Veluxi home world appeared on the screens 3 days later. It was a large gray-green planet surrounded by defensive stations and orbital platforms. The Veluxi reserve fleet, nearly 200 ships, moved into formation to meet the human attackers. High Commander Kreth had returned to his home world to lead the defense personally. He had spent the journey preparing his forces and thinking about the strange creatures who had defeated him. He still did not understand them. How could any species be so willing to die? How could they fight with such complete disregard for their own survival? He would not make the same mistakes again. His ships were ready for nuclear weapons. His soldiers wore sealed armor to protect against chemical attacks. He had positioned his fleet to create overlapping fields of fire that would destroy any ship attempting to ram. They cannot win here, he told his officers. We have the numbers. We have the position. We have the advantage. Today we end this threat to our empire forever. But as the human fleet approached, Kreth noticed something strange. The human ships were not attacking in formation. They were spreading out, creating a wide arc around the planet. And they were launching objects, small pods, that fell toward the atmosphere below. What are those? Kreth demanded. Analyze those objects immediately. Before his officers could respond, the first pods entered the atmosphere. They were designed to break apart at a specific altitude, releasing tons of catalyst compound into the air. The reaction began almost instantly. A ring of fire appeared in the upper atmosphere, spreading faster than any natural phenomenon. The methane in the air ignited, creating temperatures that would have melted steel. The fire spread downward and outward, consuming everything in its path. On the planet's surface, 8 billion Veluxi looked up and saw their sky turn to flame. Kreth watched from his flagship, his 4 eyes wide with horror. His home, his people, his entire civilization was burning before his eyes. No, he whispered. No, this cannot be happening. They cannot do this. But they could. And they did. The human fleet did not engage the Veluxi defenders. They simply watched as the planet died. Admiral Graves stood on the bridge of the Resolute, her face showing no emotion as an entire world was consumed by fire. Lieutenant Susan Palmer stood beside her, tears streaming down her face. Admiral, the slaves. There were billions of slaves on that planet. Innocent people from conquered species. I know, Graves said quietly. I know. How can we live with this? Graves turned to look at her young officer. For a moment, something human flickered in her cold eyes. Pain, guilt, the weight of impossible choices. We live with it because we must. Because if we had shown mercy, the Veluxi would have regrouped. They would have come back stronger. They would have done to Earth what we did to them. She paused. War is not about being right. It is about surviving. And humanity will survive. On the council station, the viewing room had become a place of silent horror. Ambassadors who had watched countless wars and conquests sat in shock, unable to process what they were seeing. High Counselor Thrax had not moved in hours. His 4 eyes were fixed on the screen showing the burning world. 8 billion lives snuffed out in less than a day. An empire that had lasted 10,000 years, ended by a species that had only discovered space travel 50 years ago. "This changes everything," Kelvik said, his gelatinous body trembling. "The balance of power in the galaxy has shifted. A new predator has emerged." Ambassador Tobin nodded slowly. "I warned you. Humans are survivors. They come from a world that tried to kill them every day of their evolution. They learned that mercy is a weakness and hesitation means death. They do not fight wars. They end threats. They are monsters," the crystalline ambassador chimed, its light flickering with fear. "Perhaps," Tobin replied. "Or perhaps they are simply what every species would become if pushed hard enough. We have always had the luxury of fighting civilized wars with rules and boundaries. Humans never had that luxury. They fight to win, no matter the cost." Back at the burning planet, High Commander Kreth made one final transmission. It was broadcast to the human fleet, to the Council, to the entire galaxy. "You have won," he said, his voice broken. "You have destroyed everything. My people, my world, my empire. We surrender, unconditionally. Please show mercy to those who remain." Admiral Graves listened to the transmission. Then she gave her final order. "Continue the operation. Leave nothing behind." The remaining Veluxy ships, their will to fight completely broken, were destroyed one by one. No prisoners were taken. No survivors were allowed to escape. When the human fleet finally left the Veluxy system, there was nothing left but ashes and debris. The Veluxy Empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for 10,000 years, had been completely annihilated in less than 3 weeks. And across the galaxy, every species began to realize that humanity was something they had never encountered before. A species that did not fight for territory or resources or pride. A species that fought to destroy, completely, permanently, without mercy. The age of human dominance had begun. 6 months passed after the destruction of the Veluxy home world. The galaxy slowly adjusted to a new reality. Trade routes that had once avoided human space now actively sought it out. Species that had never heard of Earth began learning human languages. And the Galactic Council received a formal request that no one had expected. Humanity wanted to join the Council. The debate lasted for 3 weeks. Some ambassadors argued that humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too violent to be trusted with Council membership. Others pointed out that refusing them might be seen as an insult, and nobody wanted to insult a species that had just wiped out an empire. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Humanity was invited to send an ambassador. The woman chosen for this role was Laura Bennett. She was 52 years old, with auburn hair streaked with gray and calm blue eyes that never seemed to blink. She had been a diplomat her entire career, skilled at the art of words and the science of persuasion. But unlike most diplomats, she had also served in the military during her youth. She understood both peace and war. Laura arrived at the Council station on a small diplomatic ship. She was accompanied by only 2 aides, a man named Peter Grant and a woman named Michelle Torres. Both were trained in diplomacy, but both also carried weapons hidden beneath their formal clothes. Humanity was taking no chances. The Council chamber was enormous, a vast dome filled with floating platforms where representatives from 47 species gathered. Each platform held ambassadors from a different civilization. Some breathed oxygen. Others existed in sealed environments filled with toxic gases or liquids. Some had physical bodies. Others were beings of pure energy who manifested as glowing shapes. Laura walked to the central platform, her steps steady and confident. Every eye, sensor, and perception organ in the chamber was focused on her. She could feel the weight of galactic attention pressing down on her, but she showed no sign of nervousness. High Counselor Thrax rose from his seat. His four eyes studied the human woman with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Ambassador Bennett," he said, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I welcome you. Before we proceed with the formal admission ceremony, the Council has some questions they would like to ask." Laura nodded. "I would be happy to answer. The destruction of the Veluxi Empire has raised concerns among many member species. Your methods were unprecedented. The use of chemical weapons, biological agents, and the final act of planetary annihilation go beyond anything we have witnessed in recorded history." Laura's expression remained pleasant. "I understand your concerns, Counselor. Can you explain to the Council why such extreme measures were necessary?" The Veluxi offered surrender at the end. Many feel their destruction after that point was excessive. A murmur ran through the chamber. Every species leaned forward, waiting for the human's response, though Laura was silent for a moment, gathering her thoughts. When she spoke, her voice was calm and measured. "Counselor, let me tell you a story. When humans were young, we lived on a planet that was constantly trying to kill us. We faced predators with claws and teeth. We faced diseases that wiped out whole populations. We faced ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and asteroid impacts. Every day was a fight for survival. Every day was a fight for survival." She paused, letting her words sink in. "During this time, we learned something important. When a threat appears, you do not wound it and hope it goes away. You destroy it completely. Because if you leave it alive, it will heal. It will grow stronger. And it will come back for revenge. The Veluxi attacked our colonies without provocation. They killed our people, including children and civilians. They made it clear that they intended to enslave or exterminate our entire species. When we defeated them, they begged for mercy. But we knew that mercy would be temporary. Give them 50 years, 100 years, and they would rebuild. They would remember what we did to them, and they would want revenge. So we did not give them that chance. We ended the threat permanently. Not because we enjoyed it. Not because we wanted to kill billions of beings. We did it because it was the only way to ensure that the Veluxi could never threaten humanity again." The chamber was completely silent. Lavra continued. "I understand that this seems cruel to you. Your civilizations have fought wars with rules and boundaries. You accept surrenders and negotiate peace treaties. You believe in mercy and second chances. Those are noble ideals, and humanity respects them." Her voice grew harder. "But understand this. You watched our colonies burn. You had the power to intervene, and you chose to observe. That was your right under Council law, and we do not hold it against you. But it taught us something important about the galaxy. No one is coming to save us. No one will protect humanity except humanity itself. So we developed our own methods, our own rules. And our primary rule is simple. Anyone who threatens our existence will be destroyed so completely that they can never threaten us again." High Counselor Thrax shifted uncomfortably. "Ambassador, surely you understand how this concerns the other species here. If humanity is willing to commit such acts against the Veluxi, how can we trust that you will not do the same to us?" Lavra smiled. It was a warm, friendly smile that somehow made every being in the chamber feel cold. "Counselor, that is entirely up to you. Humanity does not seek conflict. We want peace. We want trade and cooperation and cultural exchange. We want to be good neighbors in this vast galaxy." She leaned forward slightly. "But we also want to be very, very clear about something. We will never start a war. We will never attack without provocation. We will never threaten or bully other species. However, if anyone attacks us, if anyone threatens our people or our worlds, we will respond with everything we have. And we will not stop until the threat is eliminated. The Veloxi learned this lesson too late. We hope that no other species will need to learn it at all. She straightened and her pleasant expression returned. So, about that council membership? The vote was held immediately. Every species voted in favor of human admission. There were no objections, no debates, no requests for amendments. Humanity was welcomed into the Galactic Council with full diplomatic privileges, trade agreements, and mutual defense treaties. After the ceremony, several ambassadors approached Laura privately. They offered treaties and alliances, trade deals, and technology exchanges. Everyone wanted to be friends with humanity now. Everyone wanted to make sure they were on the right side if another conflict ever arose. Ambassador Tobin was the last to approach. The small furry creature looked up at Laura with ancient, knowing eyes. "You played that perfectly," he said quietly. The speech, the veiled threats, the offer of friendship alongside the warning. Your species is very skilled at diplomacy. Laura smiled. "We have had a lot of practice, Ambassador. Humans have been manipulating each other for thousands of years. Manipulating aliens is not much different." "I wonder," Tobin said thoughtfully, "are you truly the peaceful species you claim to be? Or are you simply predators wearing the masks of diplomats?" Laura knelt down to look the small creature in the eye. For just a moment, her pleasant mask slipped, and Tobin saw something ancient and dangerous looking back at him. Something that had survived ice ages and plagues and wars of extinction. "We are exactly what the galaxy needs us to be," she said. "Friends to those who treat us with respect. Destroyers to those who threaten us. The choice of which face we show is not ours to make. It belongs to everyone else." She stood and walked away, leaving Tobin alone with his thoughts. Across the galaxy, the news spread quickly. Humanity had joined the council. A new power had risen, and every civilization from the mightiest empire to the smallest colony began to adjust their plans accordingly. Military academies added human tactics to their curricula. Diplomatic schools taught human psychology. Trading companies learned human customs and preferences. And everywhere, parents began teaching their children a new lesson: don't be kind to humans. Trade with them. Learn from them. Befriend them if you can, but never, under any circumstances, give them a reason to fight, because humans do not fight wars. They annihilate. And the galaxy had finally learned what that meant.